Hello, and welcome to the Inclusive Leader Series, a web series that's dedicated to fostering rich discussions around diversity, equity, and inclusion through conversations with chief diversity executives from some of the nation's largest and most respected Fortune 500 organizations. Leading the conversation is Virginia Tech's Vice President for Strategic Affairs and Diversity, Dr. Menah Pratt-Clarke. Dr. Pratt-Clarke recently received national acclaim as the winner of the 2021 National Association of Diversity Officers in Higher Education Individual Leadership Award, which recognizes outstanding contributions in research administration, practice, advocacy, and/or policy, and work that informs and advances the understanding of diversity and inclusive excellence in higher education. Under her stewardship, Virginia Tech has been repeatedly selected by Insight into Diversity as a diversity champion, exemplifying an unyielding commitment to diversity and inclusion throughout the campus, communities, across academic programs, and at the highest administrative levels. Our featured guest joining her today is Theresita Richard, Vice President of Diversity, Inclusion, and Belonging Strategy and Equity at Capital One. Theresita serves as the DIB lead to the Capital One Racial Equity, or CORE, initiative, which advances racial equity, justice, and inclusion for Black and Latinx associates and communities. Theresita brings over 20 years of experience in diversity and inclusion, organizational effectiveness, operations leadership, and human resources. She is committed to unlocking potential to be bold, think big, and inspire innovation. We are excited to bring together these dynamic leaders and gain from their expertise and wisdom as we all seek to deepen our understanding and further our commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Welcome, and thank you for joining me today, Theresita. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thanks for having me.
Welcome. Capital One is our top employer for Virginia Tech with over 1,000 alumni that work at Capital One. And so really, as just a top recruiter, we are just thankful for your commitment to our graduates. Even in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic, you've hired, I think, over 100 full-time associates and interns. So we just want to start by thanking Capital One for supporting a lot of our amazing programs here at Virginia Tech. The Pamplin College of Business Diversity Program. We have a Collegiate Women in Business program that you support, the Society for Women Engineers, and other career and capstone programs. So thank you for that support. We also know that there's this really amazing corporate chapter of Capital One Hokies that exists and has been a very powerful mentorship, fellowship, and camaraderie support of alumni in the workplace. And we recently had our first ever giving day for corporate chapter ambassadors, and Capital One was in the top 3% of all ambassadors. So congratulations.
Thank you.
I'm really excited for our conversation today to talk about organizational diversity, equity, and inclusion, and the future of work. And so I've got a couple of questions I just want to start off with chatting. Then I think you're going to turn around and ask me some. So I'll start first. So I would just love for you to share a little bit about your own professional journey and how you came to kind of spearhead this DE&I work.
Yeah, so my journey has taken a few twists and turns. What I will say is that there are some threads that pull through those twists and turns. The first is that I am fascinated by humans, what makes us work, what makes us tick, the power of bringing us together. And so you'll see that throughout my career. I started out as an engineer. My background is industrial engineering and design, and so did that. I was a proud member of SWE and the National Society of Black Engineers, so near and dear to my heart. Came out of college, worked in the manufacturing environment, and led teams. And I had the gift of leading this huge cross-functional task force that would rethink how people operated within the plant. So everything from how people did their work to how they grew in their careers to how they got paid, to things like the language that we would use. And that started this whole new chapter around human resources and thinking about how do you design environments for people to thrive. So went to graduate school and moved in as an HR practitioner went from the space of manufacturing into retail, and I've spent a good 15 years of my career in the retail space, in big box retail with Home Depot and Target, moved into more experiences with Starbucks, kicked off another chapter in innovation and design, and really thinking about how do you create and design experiences for people. And that moved me into my role with Nordstrom in this incubator style innovation team. And all along the way, I was doing this people work around DIB, diversity, inclusion, and belonging. Sometimes it was leading a task force. Sometimes it was being a part of an employee or business resource group. And then I got to the point where I was leading strategy for the different parts of the organizations that I sat in. When I got to Nordstrom, it was so clear that it's a business imperative to center diversity and inclusion and belonging as the way that you do business and how you operate, and that propels you forward. Through that work, I was asked to lead the function of DIB at Nordstrom. So moved into that and also led work around how you develop amazing people leaders and how do you think about the systems and structures that impact how people grow in their jobs and in their careers. So did that work. And about 4 months ago, I joined the Capital One organization, or the family of Capital One. And it's been a really amazing journey. So the work that I do today is all around how we build a foundation of equity into everything that we do. How do we think about inclusion and this concept of belonging, and really creating a space where all of our associates, our customers that we serve, the communities that we are in, that they are able to really thrive. And so I'm really passionate about this work, as you can probably see, and I'm excited to go a little bit deeper with you today.
Well, I love your background, that engineering mindset, industrial systems, but it's how do people work with machines in a way? And then you've just stayed with that concept of how do people work? How do people work well together? And I'm really curious to learn, I think this is one of the first conversations I've had with this concept of belonging integrated into a title. And, typically it started off with first just diversity, then it was diversity, inclusion, and equity. And your role is diversity, inclusion, and belonging. And can you just share a little bit about how you've seen the evolution of these terms and why maybe at Capital One, this concept of belonging has been integrated into your actual title of your role?
Yeah, absolutely. And you're so right that there has been this journey that we've been on. I remember being in grad school and I did my thesis work around the power of inclusion, like the multiplying impact of inclusion. And at that time, that was the newer piece. As we've evolved, what we've found is that diversity and inclusion together, that has to be foundational. And then when you layer in equity as the lens through which you look at the work, you put those three things together, you get to this place of belonging. And so I think about belonging as the ultimate outcome that we are trying to go towards. As humans, we are wired to want to belong. And when we don't have that sense of belonging, that there are studies that show that we have the same impact as it would be as if we had physical pain. So the same triggers in our brain for that physical pain are the things that are triggered when we socially do not belong. And so this idea of belonging, why it's so important for us to bring it to the forefront, to name it, to put it even in our titles, is that's the outcome that we're going for. Now we have a place, a culture, an environment where whoever you are, you belong. You are in the group. And not only do you belong, but you are thriving. That's the outcome that we're going for.
Yeah, it's that thriving that I think is huge.
Yeah.
I wonder if you can, I'm seeing this less, this phrase a little bit less these days, this concept of the business case. But I'm wondering if, because we assume that everybody already gets it, that we don't have to remind people. But I often think it's helpful to be reminded of why it's important. So can you share just from your own perspective, what is the business case? Why is an investment in this work of DEI so important?
Mm-hmm. You're right. Like there's less where we have to spend time on saying, well, here's the case for diversity and inclusion, right? But I think what happens is you'd be hard pressed to find someone who wakes up in the morning and says, diversity is not important. I think you're very rarely, if at all, going to find that. What happens, though, is that when we're in our day-to-day and we're making decisions around where are we going to invest, what are we going to continue to do, where are we going to place our focuses, there are times where that inclusion, diversity, belonging is not at the forefront. So for me, it's a little bit of reframing around the business case. We already know there's so much research that shows that businesses perform better when they have diverse teams with inclusive leaders and inclusive environments. That the performance that you see far outranks that when you have homogenous teams and organizations. What we have to shift to, though, is like, what does that mean in practice in the day-to-day? Not only do I understand the business case, but I have internal practices, systems, structures, rhythms, so that when I have to make that important decision around how are we going to do business, where are we going to focus, who are we going to engage with from a supplier perspective, the products and services and experiences that I put out into the world, if I don't have DIB at the forefront of that thinking and it's not embedded within me, I'm not going to make my business decisions through that lens. So that's where I think we have to shift in the business case, is how does that really play out in practice in the day-to-day?
So let's talk about that. So the playing out in practice day-to-day. So, and making business decisions, investments. So I'm wondering if you can share just what do you see, where are you seeing corporations invest in making business decisions that really further that commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion and belonging?
Mm-hmm. Love that question. So there are three things that come to mind for me. And I think that there's a piece around who you have in the room. Right now, many of us are in virtual rooms. So who do you have in the virtual room around the table and who's making decisions? So that first piece comes up with the connection to the business around the diversity of the teams that you are engaging with, the suppliers that you are doing business with, as you think about even how you are designing your products, the services that you put out, the experiences that you're creating. That's a place where, and I see it starting to emerge more, where there's this question around, like, what does it look like to, by design, have frameworks that are equitable, have ways of making decisions that are equitable and have inclusion at the forefront? And how do we really center the experiences of those that we are designing for, that we are building for and creating for? So we often will talk about that on the side of customer, like what does it look like to center the customer's experience? I think that's a place where you will see that lens of diversity and inclusion and belonging really play out. And you can tell when that's in place and when it's not, even by the way that the products and the services that you put out to the world, how it speaks to different people. Is it only speaking to one type of person, one background of person? Or can you really see in those products and services and experiences that you are serving many?
I wonder if DEI, I think of as a culture, right? I mean, sometimes it's operationalized in policies and procedures and ways of being, but it's a culture. And I'm wondering if you can share a little bit about how you think companies integrate that culture, that value into the work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a quote. Now, I don't know who to give credit to, so if you do, please tell me. And it says that culture will eat strategy for breakfast.
I heard that so, and I think I even heard it this week at a meeting. I think somebody typed that into the chat. I was like, oh.
It's like, who said this? Who said this? So I can give you credit.
Anonymous.
Anonymous, yes. So I'm sure someone seeing this is going to say, I know who that is, and you don't have to let us know so we can make sure we give them credit. But here's the thing that I think about what culture. When you think about what culture is, it's the way that you do things. It's the unwritten rules. It is it's the way that things happen, the norms, the system and that you're operating in. And so when I think about the culture piece of diversity, equity, inclusion, even this notion of like, what is belonging? What does that really mean? I think it comes down to things like, who do you have in the room? who's invited to the table, whose voice is heard at the table, and what are the practices that you have so that when you realize, because we're human and it's going to happen, that someone's voice is not being heard or consistently a group is not being heard, what are the practices that you have to intentionally, consciously bring that into the room, bring that into the space? And so when I think about culture and how that shows up as a mindset, as a way of life, it's something that when we do it well, it's completely invisible. Like one of my ways that I measure success of DE&I efforts is if I am now at a place where I say, okay, now I'm going to do my diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging work. And now I'm going to go do my real job. When those things are separate, we are not at a place of success. When it's woven together and so integral to how we operate, that it is literally invisible, but you feel it, that's that feeling of belonging. That's when we know that we have been successful and that we are making change in this space. And it's a journey. And so until we get there, we've got to be able to name when it's not happening. So we have to have language around it so we can name it and we can then do something about it, because when we name it, we can face it and then we can change it and shift it.
Yeah, you're trying to change certain unconscious behavior into better unconscious behavior. So it's subconscious initially until it becomes more routine and part of how we engage.
That's right.
So 4 months, you've been there at Capital One, 4 months. What has most surprised you about maybe what expectations you came in with, what you thought you were going to be dealing with, the culture of the company? What most surprised you in your first 4 months?
What has most surprised me is such a good question. I've been thinking about this. And I would say it's a surprise and it's a delight. And I think I think you mentioned that there were about 100 or so or more students that we've hired. Like one thing you will find is that people are genuinely kind. There is a kindness and a care for humans that are around you that in a sense, it kind of blows my mind. And it's sad to have to say that that's not everywhere. But I have found that to be so genuine at Capital One. And that caring extends to wanting to be thoughtful around how do we think about data? How do we think about the impact that we're having? How do we connect the dots? How do we study a problem and then really go after it, break it down, put it back together again? One of our values one of the things we talk about is like really kind of take in the wisdom of the crowd and like really think about those things. I have found that it was something that intrigued me when I was in my process of deciding, will I join the Capital One family? And it's something that I have found and have seen to be held true, and it has held in my long 4-month tenure. It is held, and I actually think that kindness, that care for humanity, that desire to study a problem, really understand it, take it apart, put it back together again, and find a better way, dream, disrupt, and find a better way is actually what's going to help us make even a greater impact on our associate base, our customer base, and on different communities. So I'm actually like really excited to leverage that goodness of who Capital One is to have greater impact in the world.
A lot of those values you talk about, kindness, I've always said I have felt at Virginia Tech we're a community with extraordinary kindness. When you talk about serving humanity, ut prosim is our motto, that I may serve. And so I think there's a lot of values at Virginia Tech that resonate with the values of Capital One. I want to use that thought process to think about how we, in higher ed institutions, we're developing a workforce in many ways for companies like Capital One. And I'm wondering if you can share a little bit about maybe advice that you would give to students as they think about going from this sort of little sacred protective bubble of the academy, and they're 18 to 22, just exploring the world and being themselves and being in a lot of social groups and clubs and studying what's interesting to them, to boom, you're in this corporate America. What advice should we, think about for students, but as institutions preparing students, what do you need us to maybe be doing a little bit better so that the workforce that we're preparing for companies is as prepared as it could be?
There are two things that come to mind. The first is it's to get broad experiences. So I think it's very rare to find someone who will do the exact thing that they studied in college and then move into the exact role and stay in that exact space for 20 plus years, right? And so I think the beauty of college, and it's one of those times that I don't know that you ever have that same environment again. You have the gift of being able to gain many different experiences to kind of hone your skill of studying the world and having that critical thought, that ability to critique and also create. And so I think to continue to like really hone that and have different experiences, go after internships, join that club that feels like, is this group for me? Everyone in that group is different from me. Well, maybe that's why you need to be a part of it so you can gain that different perspective. Because when you take the fullness of that and then move into the workplace, I think it really helps for all of the different experiences that you are going to be able to have. And which leads me to my second thought, which is meet judgment with curiosity. By the nature of being humans, we are going to judge. It's a part of our human condition. But one of the things that I really value, especially when I get a chance to engage with students, are the ability to ask amazing questions that push us. It is not about you having the answer. The moment that we think we have the answer to everything, we've already lost, right? But if you can ask amazing questions that push us, that like provoke some different thought, that lead to the next question, that actually opens up possibilities and then expands your story. And that's what we're really trying to do, is expand the story, expand our impact. So I would say that, take full advantage of this time that you have as you're, in your college years to get broad experiences, and then bring that into the workplace and meet those different judgments that you're going to have with curiosity, and bring the questions, because we need it.
Bring the questions. Love that. Love that. Well, thank you. Thank you for just sharing your ideas and suggestions. And I guess we're going to shift now, and you're going to.
Yes. Now I get the chance to ask you questions, which I'm really excited about. And so first, I just want to hear your personal story. I'd love to hear about your path and what brought you to Virginia Tech.
Oh, sure. I think everyone who gets into this work has a really unique journey and set of life experiences that brings us to this point. And I guess for me, I think back about a seminal moment in my childhood, which was when I was 10 years old, and my parents made me. I say made me because they did. They made me watch Roots. And it had such an impact. Like, why are these Black people treated so badly? And growing up as the only Black student in my high school graduating class of 388 students, playing professional tennis after I finished high school, playing classical piano and violin. My parents were faculty members. My dad was an immigrant from Sierra Leone in West Africa, and my mother's grandmother was enslaved. And so coming from African and African-American parents who were very strongly impacted by racism in their own journeys, socialized me into a way of thinking and a level of consciousness that as a Black person, as a Black woman, as a Black girl, my life experience was going to be very different from those who were white. And I wanted to understand why, and I wanted to be able to maybe help others. And so the work for me started at the University of Iowa. I minored in African-American history and majored in literature, trying to get what's happening, what's the history of Black people in America. I did a master's thesis on William Faulkner because I fell in love with his writing, but I was trying to understand how he talked about Black and white characters and the history of the South. And then that led me to Vanderbilt University and getting a law degree and a PhD in sociology, again, looking at issues of race, class, and gender, critical race studies, how the law created and perpetuated discrimination, but then how the law also tried to eliminate discrimination and racism. and ended up practicing law. So I just became a regular old corporate lawyer in corporate America for a couple of years, and real estate, commercial lending, construction law. And then I went in-house at Vanderbilt. So I went back to my alma mater and started doing compliance work, started doing governance work. So I was the assistant secretary of the university and was doing work around boards and how does Vanderbilt's board work and the committees and the governance of a university. And then I moved to the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign and started doing basic civil rights work, affirmative action, equal employment opportunity, disability, diversity work. Started my faculty journey there. So I became a tenured faculty member while I was at University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. And then I moved to Virginia Tech about 5 years ago. And so this role includes not only inclusion and diversity, but I'm also the vice president for strategic affairs and diversity. So it's been a nice space to combine a lot of different roles and work. And then I'm also a professor of education. And so it's been a wonderful academic, intellectual, administrative role for me here.
That's awesome. I love hearing about your path, and I think about just the diversity of experience, because we talked about those twists and turns, that you take. How have you brought just kind of the fullness of your experiences into what you've focused on at Virginia Tech over the last 5 years? I mean, I'd love to just hear how that has played in. And then specifically, as we talk about the work you've done around inclusive VT, the university's commitment to inclusion and diversity, I'd love to hear about some of the successes and how you've had this journey over the past few years.
I think the benefit of coming to Virginia Tech is that there was a legacy of many people for many years trying very hard to do good work. It never quite came together, but there were people, when I started, I read 15 to 20 years of reports. It was about 2,000 pages of reports of people who had been researching, okay, if we do this, this should work. If we do this, this should work. And for whatever reason, there weren't the resources or maybe the level of commitment at the time to advance some of these really great ideas. And so I was able to come in during a new president. President Sands had just started maybe about a year before I began, who said, I will put the resources into this work. I will provide support. I will provide the tone at the top. I will signal my commitment in terms of investments and resources. And so I think I was very fortunate to come into a space where there was a new leader. The institution had a readiness as the ground had been fertilized, it had been watered, it was ready to grow. And maybe in some way I was a catalyst, but maybe a group of new leadership at Virginia Tech, the board had a lot of new members. So throughout the institution, it was a time of change. And I think I was able to participate in a community with others who were ready to leverage the good work that had been done. And my mom has always talked about that we stand on the backs of others and we need to be the backbone for others. And so I came here understanding that whatever work I did was on the backs of many, many people who had been doing the work. And I was able to come and leverage that. And so for me, I think that's been what's been wonderful. I've come into like a place that was ready to move and have been able to help support that.
I love that. It seems like the time was right. There was this work that had been done before, and as you talked about kind of the watering and the nurturing that had taken place, like a garden was coming into my mind, like all of the stuff under the surface had been done and make the time right, to really emerge. So it sounds like you've taken some great advantage of that. One of the things that I am thinking about is the question of what surprised you that you asked me. And so I'd love to hear from you and your journey around, what has surprised you.
I think it was coming into Southwest Virginia, as people told me is what I was coming to. Because they initially I said, where's Blacksburg? And they said, Southwest Virginia, are you interested? And I said, no, I'm not interested in being in Southwest Virginia. Southwest Virginia has surprised me. Virginia Tech in Southwest Virginia has surprised me.
Oh, yes, you got to tell me more. Tell me more.
In a wonderful way. And the extraordinary kindness that I mentioned, it was exceptional. And I always go back to this really kind of signature event. So when I came on campus to interview, I had been told that there was a Chick-fil-A on campus, and I have a deep love of Chick-fil-A. And where I lived, there was no Chick-fil-A. Like we had it and then went away. So I saw a student and I said, I hear there's a Chick-fil-A on campus. Where is it? And he said, he explains, over the river and through the woods, how you describe things on a college campus. I said, wait, tell me again where it is. And he said, I will take you there. So this random student walks me across campus to the Chick-fil-A. And we just had a lovely conversation. But to me, that was this act of just extraordinary kindness and gentleness and friendliness. And that's what I have found here, that this student wasn't exceptional. This student was the norm of people at Virginia Tech. It's just an amazing kindness. And I think it's because the motto that I mentioned earlier, ut prosim that I may serve, it's not just a motto on a piece of paper. It's a way, it's a culture. It's culture. It's way of being. And people very much own that. And I've been at other institutions. I can't even remember what their motto was, some other phrase in Latin that I don't even remember. But I know Virginia Tech's motto. We know it. We own it. And so when I think about who we are as an institution and our responsibility, I see it as that we have a responsibility to prepare students to be of service to anyone at any time and anywhere. And if we have that mindset, then this issue of diversity, inclusion, equity, and belonging, we recognize people are different. There's different identities, there's different backgrounds, there's different positionalities. We have a sensitivity to that. When we think about helping and serving and being of service to others, we bring that lens. I want to make sure that we, as an institution, help our students be able to bring that lens to the world. So I think that's what surprised me. It's like Southwest Virginia, way cool. Well, who knew?
Who knew?
Yeah.
Oh, I love it. I love it. So my brother is a Hokie, and I know he would be so proud right now. So I'm going to take a moment for him and just say, that is awesome, an incredible foundation to build upon. So question for you around just the strong industry relationships, partnerships. I know that Virginia Tech is well known for that. And so I'm wondering where you see potential opportunities for that industry and university partnership, in particular, as we think about diversity, equity, and inclusion.
I think there's two things. I think one is companies are saying we need diversity. We understand that's, representational diversity, people from different backgrounds and identities. And they typically look to colleges and universities to supply that diversity, which means that we have a responsibility, not just for the corporate side of things, but just for who we are as an institution, to be diverse. So I think that one opportunity is we have to create these diverse little mini workplaces, which is what higher ed institutions can and should be in the classrooms, the work around teams. So we need to have the diversity here that we can leverage and help corporations leverage for their workforces. At the same time, higher ed institutions also need to build a culturally competent leaders. So we have the opportunity. It's hard to send out non-culturally competent people into the workforce and then expect to come I'll do all this diversity training. Now get your people culturally competent. It'd be great if we did that before send students out. So I think we can partner by providing a culturally competent, sensitive, informed, educated workforce into the world. And so to the extent that there can be conversations like ours, where it's like, okay, what do y'all need? What are you seeing? Are students prepared? Do they, are they not prepared? What do we need to do to make sure that they are as effective and prepared leaders in the world? So I think even this concept more and more of experiential learning and teams, people need to, you don't work by yourself, you work with other people. It's project-based, it's team. So our curriculum, I think, more is evolving or needs to continue to evolve to not just be, hey, memorize these facts in a book and it's just a bunch of theory. I mean, I'm all for theory, but how do we apply it? And how do we help students begin to actually apply theory, work in teams, and do real world stuff, not stuff from the 1800s or whatever. It's like, okay, there was a pandemic in 1920, 1916, but now this is 20, and we have another pandemic. So
right here.
Right now we're in pandemic mode. What do we need to do? Like, okay, we need masks that really are happening. We need this that's happening. We need, hand sanitizer. We need, so how do we stay relevant as an institution to prepare our students to be relevant in the world? And how do we partner with corporations around what are the problems corporations are dealing with? They don't need to wait till our students graduate to start dealing with real world problems. So can we get corporations to come and be part of our curricular design and development to help make sure that our students are as prepared as they can be?
Yes. I co-signed this message and I'm like, sign me up. Because it would be great. I love that idea of like, how do you bring in the real world problems that we're trying to solve, bring it into the classroom now that already working on teams, projects, 100% yes. Love that. So as you think about what's ahead, let's say over in the next 5 to 10 years, what do you hope to be able to say is different about the DEI landscape at Virginia Tech?
So when we started to define inclusive ET. So when I came here, we really did not have a good definition of it, but we knew it was what our thing was called, but we just didn't know what our thing was. So we defined it as the institutional and individual commitment to our motto, Ut Prosim, that I may serve, in the spirit of community, diversity, and excellence. Okay, so inclusive ET is this commitment at the institutional and individual level. And then we defined 4 goals for inclusive ET. And the first goal, which is, I think, for me, the most important one, is sustainable institutional transformation. Okay, so the first goal is sustainable institutional transformation, representational diversity, increasing that representational diversity on campus, faculty, staff, and students, welcoming, affirming, safe, and accessible campus climate, and then integrating diversity into the academic mission, into our curriculum. And so in 5 to 10 years, 15, 20 years, I would hope that there is sustainable institutional transformation so that whoever is leading this work at Virginia Tech, whoever is at Virginia Tech, this concept of inclusive ET is demonstrated. People would say, oh, yes, I see the institutional commitment to the motto. I see how Virginia Tech is organized and the structures and the systems and the policies and practices and procedures have now embedded diversity and inclusion into the culture. It's almost unconscious as our way of being, that we're interacting with different people. It is a welcoming, belonging. People feel they belong, even though everybody's different and bringing different backgrounds and perspectives. That is that sense of peace and comfort and be who you need to be here. So I would hope that over the course of the growth of the institution, that it's whatever changes continue to happen, they're sustainable and they're embedded in a permanent way because they're good things in terms of how the institution is trying to move forward.
I love that. I literally grabbed my pen and wrote that down. Sustainable institutional transformation. Yes. Can I get an amen on that? I love it because I think that that's true, right? We live and work in institutions. And so if we think about that sustained transformation, I love that. I can't wait to hear more around how it's continuing to evolve and to be a part of that as a corporate partner. So I have one more question for you. I think we have time for one more, which is if you had to share one piece of advice with a DEI leader in a similar role at another university, what would that piece of advice be?
I think to do this work, you have to have an extraordinary level of persistence and perseverance because the work is not easy. And it's funny because I was having a conversation with someone about disrespect and how a lot of times in my life, in these roles, I experience disrespect. And it's not as if the path is smooth in this work. There are mountains that have to be moved, and is chipping away here and there, sometimes figuring out that you actually don't have to chip away. You can actually go around. Like that mountain was irrelevant. It's like, didn't even need to worry about that. Let's just go around that. There's a little road over here. So this persistence and perseverance, something that took me 10 years at one institution took a year at Virginia Tech. But during those 10 years at the other institution, it's like, okay, can we talk about this? Can we keep talking about this? Can we talk, and so that quality to do this work, you don't get to check out. I don't feel that if you've signed up for this work or you see it as a calling, you don't get to check out and say, I'm done with that. You can take pauses and breaks. I'm a fan of that. Yeah, I say even boxers get to sit on the little stool in the corner for a little break in between the rounds. So I'm very much a fan of taking pauses and breaks and resting, but you don't get to check out. And so you have to stay in it, even when you are seemingly making no progress, because people are always watching you, whether you think they're watching you or not. They're always looking at you, and you have to remain hopeful and you have to remain positive, even when the mountain is not moving. And so I guess that would be, and I do believe change happens. I mean, the Washington Redskins changed their name. Confederate statutes have come down. Changes that we never doubt. It took a horrible act of violence to create these shifts, but shifts that we renamed 2 buildings at Virginia Tech last summer. So things that individuals had been lobbying for decades have changed seemingly overnight, but not overnight. And not without great loss of life and sacrifice. And so that's why I say, for me, my advice is just persistence and perseverance in the work.
I know that question, I said for another university leader, DEI leader, but I receive all of that, right? And so that your words are so powerful around the persistence and, not to give up hope and to keep pushing, to keep doing that work. So yes, I receive all of it, including the piece around the mountains that have to be moved, or when you might just need to go around that mountain. So yes, thank you so much. I love just the words of wisdom and the insights that you have shared, and know that I am taking that with me as well into my work.
Thank you. I feel like I made a new friend today. So I just want to thank you and Capital One for making time for our conversation. I'm very grateful for our partnership and the relationship that we have with Capital One, and look forward to many more future conversations, maybe offline even. So
yes, absolutely. I 100% agree.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today. We hope this conversation and series will be a reinforcement for students, alumni, and all Hokies to positively represent themselves in their professions and communities. To learn more about Inclusive VT and other programs supporting diversity, equity, and inclusion at Virginia Tech, check out our website at www.inclusive.vt.edu. We hope you'll join us next time.